Gary Nickerson.
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
And this is Outside My Window.
Doug Jones is the CEO of Ignite Atlantic, bringing a wealth of experience in strategic leadership and business innovation. With a background in entrepreneurship and technology, Doug has dedicated his career to fostering growth and facilitating change in various industries. At Ignite Atlantic, he focuses on driving progress and cultivating partnerships that enhance the organization's impact on regional development. Doug is known for his visionary approach and commitment to empowering startups and communities through economic opportunities and sustainable practices. Doug is the CEO and founder of multiple companies specializing in sports product development and is a two-time Atlantic Top 50 CEO and a National County Social Innovation Award winner. We had a chance to chat with Doug at his office in Yarmouth.
I moved to Yarmouth in 1996. I'd gone to St. Mary's University, and I started working with the community college as a faculty, and was still doing my entrepreneurial ventures through my career as an instructor. But I ended up in Yarmouth, and I was doing some pretty interesting things, both in the college and outside the college, and I started focusing on marketing primarily, which was my background from St. Mary's, and started doing some work locally, but soon started expanding that mostly in the sports world, and started doing some work across Canada in sports, working in the junior hockey league, working with Hockey Canada, started doing some work with baseball, and it kind of led me in a direction to start getting connected with groups like the Toronto Blue Jays, and I started what became the Honda Super Camps. Were actually started right here in Yarmouth. My very first camp was with Dwayne Ward and Kelly Gruber here in Yarmouth, and I expanded those, brought in some of my other contacts in the baseball world, like Bill Lee, Lloyd Mosby, Mark Eichhorn, Candy Maldonado, Roberto Alomar, and the list kind of goes on. And we kind of grew that program across Canada, and we ended up traveling most of the summer doing camps with these pros for kids, and it really wasn't a money maker for me. I was pretty passionate about baseball and sports in general, but I also wanted to create opportunities for kids.
And that's a big deal, is that you let kids play.
Yeah, and I mean, in rural places, a lot of times they don't get exposure to this type of thing. Like, growing up, I was fortunate, growing up in some of the places I was in, and having a father that was, working in hockey. I got to meet lots of pros, lots of opportunities came my way because of that. But I recognized in my own kids growing up through junior high and high school and being very active in sports, we had to travel. We had to go other places, and I don't like that. I don't like it from I don't mind experiencing new things, but I think we should have more opportunities for kids in our local area. So that's why I started those, but it kind of snowballed from there, and I started doing work down in the United States with some different groups down there, and started getting connected with Phil Simms quarterback camps. I started doing marketing for a bunch of different athletes down there, and it kind of grew and grew, and I ended up now developing sporting goods products for major brands like Wilson Sporting Goods, Louisville Slugger. Done some stuff with Nike, Rawlings, and others, and just grew my network, and it continues to this day. But the real interesting part was I started to focus more and more on what I was excited to do, and I've always been excited around building business, and I've been excited around sports. So I kind of fired all my other customers that weren't in those areas, and really focused there, because I was always passionate about it. I still am passionate about it when I'm around sports and working with different groups. It's exciting to me, and I guess through all that work was where Ignite kind of started. Was friends of mine that were in the government and in the federal and provincial governments kind of learned about what I was doing, and the companies I was working with and the products I was launching and things like that, and they couldn't understand how I was able to do that in Yarmouth. It just didn't make a lot of sense to them. And then they asked, well, you must have accessed government programs and stuff like this. And I said, no.
And what year would that have been?
That was it was 6 years ago, so 2018.
Yeah.
Just before that, 2017 was when they started talking to me. But I basically said, they asked how I did it, and I said, well, nobody told me I couldn't. So I figured out a way to do it, ways to prototype, ways to build it, and a lot of times it's very simple. It just seems very complicated to people, so what the federal government and provincial government said, well, could you help other entrepreneurs kind of take that approach, and like, what would I have needed that would have helped my business grow at the time? So that was the seedling for Ignite. And then originally they said, we wanted you to set up a tech incubator. And I said, well, I don't know that that's exactly what we could make work here, simply because although we have the college here, it's not a 4-year computer science degree. It's not, and to develop a tech ecosystem, you need a critical mass of tech entrepreneurs, and that didn't exist here. But what I did say was, we have a diverse group of entrepreneurs from different sectors. I don't want to change the community. Like, I think there's a lot of really valuable lessons coming out of the seafood sector and out of the agricultural sector and our primary industries. And actually, those are the biggest economic drivers we have. So I said, I'd like to do something to drive innovation around those spaces. And we started doing that as well. And it's been really interesting because we've had a wide variety of entrepreneurs. We built this hub to give them space to come in and work, but we also wanted to create collisions between entrepreneurs and create a bit of a community, because it's a very lonely place to be an entrepreneur, especially in a rural community. And it's very scary. There's a lot of fear around it. So we wanted to create a space that was okay to fail in. And we would provide resources. We don't provide funding, but what we do provide is our network. And we've got over 80 organizations that have partnered with Ignite to bring different resources and stuff to those. And I've asked those organizations to come here rather than, force an entrepreneur to go downtown Halifax to sit in an office where they don't know anybody. We've tried to take that burden away and really build really good networks amongst the entrepreneurs, and then provide them access to all kinds of things like studio space, photography equipment, video equipment, you name it. We've got it to surround the entrepreneur in a self-help fashion, so that they have to learn to use these tools and then build it however they choose. And that's kind of the quick version of what got me to here and what established Ignite. But Ignite's grown quite a bit since then, with multiple locations in the province, big facility in New Glasgow, offices in Halifax, and working with entrepreneurs really in all aspects, all regions of Nova Scotia now.
Was Ignite modeled on anything that was existing at the time, or was it really something that you kind of built from the ground up?
Well, when I finally agreed to do it, I researched all kinds of organizations in Canada and met with different organizations that were doing something in this space. What I was finding was they were all, the vast majority were focused on tech. So I could learn some lessons from what they were doing or what resources they had. But I really came to the conclusion that we had to be our own thing.
Now, were more of them urban than rural?
Yeah, all of them.
Really?
Yeah, like we were the very first rural-based innovation hub in Canada. So this was really an experiment in Yarmouth, and Yarmouth grew so quickly that I think it opened the eyes of the government to say, okay, we're not, the services that are out there aren't necessarily providing everything that an entrepreneur needs in a rural place. So, we kind of jumped on it, learned as we went. The way the organization started is definitely not what the organization is today. We've learned a lot of lessons. We've built a lot of infrastructure, but we've also adapted to the communities, because even our facility in New Glasgow, we have a different approach there than we do in Yarmouth. I think communities are different. We have our own culture. We have our own way of doing things, and that's part of the great thing about doing something like this in a rural community, because I celebrate the fact that I use the John Patch story all the time when I'm discussing, Ignite, because John Patch was a fisherman who developed the screw propeller to really get to the fishing grounds. Well, that's innovation. It may not be tech or what we deem as tech, but the fact is the world would be a vastly different place if it wasn't for John Patch. Yeah. And he happened to be in Yarmouth. Well, I think we should celebrate those stories a little bit more. I think he's one of many stories like that across Nova Scotia. And entrepreneurs typically will scratch their own itch. And he was scratching his own itch. He needed to get to the fishing grounds quicker. So this was his way of doing it. It's a great story that every time I speak at an event or at a conference or whatever, and I say this, nobody knows who it is, because I'm typically in major cities, and they scratch their head. But I open their eyes to the fact that innovation can occur anywhere. And I believe innovation has built the country, and it's been built around rural communities. So that's my soapbox speech about innovation. But
that being said, now when you think about it for a minute, the success that you've had here, has it inspired other rural communities to kind of jump on?
Yeah, we've been approached by quite a few. I mean, the New Glasgow one was after a year of being in business, we expanded to New Glasgow, but we've done events everywhere in the province at this point, through whether it's stuff around seafood innovation or startup competitions or tourism startup weekends or whatever it may be. We're being stretched into these rural communities. I know they would all like an Ignite, but it's an expensive thing to do. And because it's tax dollars I'm working with, I have to be very careful about growth. So we're looking at creative ways to build partnerships in those communities and bring in these events and programming without having to have a big physical structure there. And I think the sky's the limit. I think we're going to be doing more. We just did some events in Parsboro and Amherst and Wolfville and places like this. And those are great places for us to be. Again, they have a unique makeup in the community. They've built on traditional industries there, but they have a lot of good ideas and a lot of entrepreneurs of all ages that want to do something big.
When you think of the landscape for support for entrepreneurs or businesses in general, people will think of the old RDA model. Now it's the REN. You've got CBDC, and you've got ACOA. You've got Nova Scotia Business Inc. But where does Ignite kind of fit in there? Are you part of the central core? Are you more of a spoke on the wheel? How does that work?
We partner with all of those organizations, and we look for ways that we can leverage each other. Certain things that we would do may not fit with CBDC. So we get a lot of businesses coming in with just an idea, have a sketch on a napkin type of idea. It's hard to go and borrow money to build a business based on that. So what we do is we look at those ideas and say, how do we help this entrepreneur really get to a point where they're a fundable concept or investable, or however you want to phrase it. So we partner with everybody. Like, we do a lot of work with ACOA around various projects. We work with Invest Nova Scotia tons. They have a huge amount of skill set inside their organizations. They have funding programs. They have all these things. But a lot of times the company has to be at a certain level to access those programs. So we recognized there was a gap in that very early stage where they just needed help getting through that first year.
Almost like microfunding.
It's almost like microfunding without the funding part. So we try and help them, access grants and things like this, but we're not a funder ourselves. So what we try to do is help them bootstrap without leveraging their houses and all that sort of stuff, but come in here and we try to take the idea, put a framework of enterprise around it so that they can actually build the plane while they're flying it a little bit. And then, really helping them to identify their customer base and their sales and things like this so that they can demonstrate to the CBDCs and the ACOAs and the Invest, I've got some market traction now. And that's really been the gap in the marketplace, is we didn't have an organization that can help with those ideas and really give them structure around how to build a business around that. And I guess that's kind of why the government looked to me, because that's exactly what I did. Was I bootstrapped myself to build these businesses and build these products that I brought to market and stuff like that. And I didn't realize at the time I was doing anything that crazy. But when I look back, I say, well, it was kind of special what I did, because I didn't have funding, and what I did have the fortune of is I was still a faculty member getting paid, and I was doing this as a side hustle to get started. So we see a lot of that type of stuff too, is that people are working other jobs but developing their side hustle, and hopefully that side hustle becomes something that's their full-time gig. But yeah, so I would say we're part of the ecosystem, and we've identified the areas that the ecosystem was lacking. And the other part is a lot of our partner organizations don't exist in Yarmouth. So we're trying to, and I say it all the time, we're trying to shrink the province. We're trying to get access to all those programs, services, and organizations that don't exist here, but through us, that we can bring them into our spaces or connect them to the entrepreneurs. And there's a lot of really great things happening in the province. Like there's a lot of good programs, supports. Just so happens that they weren't physically located here.
When I think that, one of the pluses of internet and social media is to kind of expand and make it a little bit more of a global village. Where do you see the value of the internet and social media falling into the current day's entrepreneurs' plans? It has to be a major factor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, your customer, I say this to almost everybody we work with, your customer is not your neighbor anymore. Your customer is somebody who's in another country or, they're not, the way businesses are built now, you have to think globally. And that's the real opportunity is you can be in a community like Yarmouth and use social media and digital marketing as a tool to reach global audiences. So if you ignore that side of the business, you're never going to expand into those markets. I think you have to identify who your customer is, who wants to buy what you're selling, but you have to take geography out of the equation. And so I love when I'm selling products and I've got this little ding on my phone every time I sell a product, so I know I've sold something. But I love when I'm selling to somebody in a new country or, in different parts of the U.S. A lot of my products are sold through the U.S. and Europe primarily, but just the fact that I can be here, do my own marketing here, I can be a Nova Scotian and sell anywhere is tremendous. And I think that's the big opportunity now for young people coming up. I'd love to see a day where they can stay in our communities and build vibrant enterprises, sell locally, but also sell internationally and around the world. That would be ideal because we need the brain power of the next generation to continue our growth. And I do think we've got a very unique opportunity here in Yarmouth compared to some of the cities I visit. The ability to breathe, and experience what we have to offer in nature, but just having a life that's not surrounded by concrete is tremendous. And I always try to explain to people that I meet internationally, like where I live. And I lived in Yarmouth for many years, but when my kids went to university, I downsized to my cottage and concession, and not a very big area.
No.
But I'm still working globally from my cabin on the lake.
I know when I first started working for CSC, my current day job, the idea is that as long as you had reliable internet, answered the phone when it rang, and worked the hours you needed to, it really didn't matter where you were. Yeah. The reliable internet part was the key because everything else is driven over that.
Talent is talent. It doesn't matter where it lives. And that's the thing. Why do major international brands like Wilson and Louisville and others work with me? And I'm not bragging about talent, but they like the work that I produce, and it really doesn't play a factor in where I live. Quite honestly, a lot of the folks I work with in the U.S. around the Midwest when I say Nova Scotia, they have no geographical context for where this strange and foreign land is, right? So I usually have to point it out on some sort of map for them. And it hit home when I was in Newfoundland recently. I was talking to a CEO in Cincinnati, and I told him I was in Newfoundland, and he says, "What is that?" Not where is that? What is that? So it's a different thing. But often we don't talk about geography. We talk about, am I the right person to help them achieve their goals? And luckily, I have been that person for these companies.
I've been lucky with the clients that I work on in my day job. A lot of them are in Europe, and I just say I'm across the pond. and they get it.
Yeah.
They get it.
Yeah.
If you've got the talent and the skill set, it shouldn't really matter where you're standing, as long as you're able to produce and be effective.
Yeah. And I really, and that was part of, being a faculty member in the college was I could see so much talent in these young people going through the programs, and they were moving. A lot of them had to move away to get jobs and to be paid well and things
That was
like
a big
this.
thing when I was younger. I mean, people, I got to move out west, got to go work in the oil field or something in order to be able to get. I got to get out of Yarmouth because there's nothing here.
Yeah, and it'll be great to see, and we're seeing that already. Like the type of entrepreneur that's coming in here, I'm starting to see people that have moved here through COVID now starting businesses and things like this. But I'm also seeing a few younger people moving back to the area to start they've worked for a few years with somebody else. They've moved back here for lifestyle and cost of living, that sort of thing, and now they're starting enterprise. So it's encouraging because I think unless we have this new generation of business owners, and it may not be what we picture to be a business. There's a lot of very creative businesses that aren't brick and mortar, that aren't your what we would deem to be a business, but they're very creative ideas and they have a market. And the way I look at it is if you've got a addressable market out there and you can build it, doesn't matter where you live.
In the beginning, I'm sure you had an idea in your head of what's going to define success for Ignite at that time. How has that evolved over the years?
Well, I guess starting out, success was surviving the couple of years of funding that they had laid out for me. I didn't have a lot of funding to start with, to get it off the ground. But the nice part was COA and the province of Nova Scotia really were hands off. They just said, "You build it. Show us some success. Tell us what you've discovered. Tell us what you've done." And that was the first 2 years. So success to me,
Is that unusual though?
very unusual. Yeah.
Normally the government wants to micromanage a little bit. It's their money.
Yeah, not so much in this one. Now, as it's grown, there's more metric data and stuff like this. But at the time, this was such an unknown type of project that they said, go do it, keep us informed, let us know what you discover and see how it grows. So the first 2 years were exactly that. I was talking to community and trying to figure out, all right, what is it that we're going to be? Within the first 12 months, we had outgrown our initial space. We started in the community college, and we said, well, if we could get over the next 2 years, if we could help 10 entrepreneurs, that's success. Well, we had 10 entrepreneurs in 6 months. And then we had approaching 20 at the end of the year, and we had outgrown our space. And the space that we're in today is quite a bit bigger. And we tend to hover around having, I'm comfortable when we have 10 entrepreneurs at a time in each of our locations. And right now we're at about 30. So we're kind of pushing it, but it's manageable because a lot of the entrepreneurs work various times. Some are working other jobs, coming in as a side hustle or whatever, but on any given day, we're pretty full and busy. And I spent last week in New Glasgow. It's the same thing. We have the facility's a little larger in New Glasgow, but we've grown to that point. So now, when it comes to success is not measured by Ignite, it's measured by the entrepreneurs. So just next door here on the other side of this wall, we have a company that's doing an investor pitch, raising, they're trying to raise about $5 million. And to me, that's the success. If I can build a company or help build a company to that level where they're able to attract that kind of investment, that's success. They've expanded, from 1 employee to now 8 employees. Well, that's success, because as you employ people, the community prospers. There's more people putting money back into the economy. So it's a whole bunch of little successes. Like I look at the successes of my team members, and I'm a pretty, I don't know if you call it empowering, but I empower my team to make decisions and to develop programs and to do things that might fail. I think it's wrong for me to profess all this stuff about taking risk and all this if I'm not willing to take risks on my team members. So even watching their growth and the stuff that they've accomplished and stuff, like, often I'll get credit for stuff, and it's really not me that did it. It's really, you have to have that team. So the team here and in New Glasgow and Halifax, they're just tremendous people that are really motivated. I think they've drunk the Doug Jones Kool-Aid and realized, we're not going to change the world overnight. We're gonna have little successes, and we're gonna build from a grassroots level and build momentum. So now, if I'm talking to a government funder, they're going to want metrics on how many startups we did, how many events we hosted, how many youth programs did we run, all that sort of stuff. And that's fine. It doesn't measure the human side of what we're doing. And by that, I just mean like changing people's lives and allowing them to be entrepreneurs and be successful at it. Like, that to me is hard to quantify, because success for an entrepreneur varies. Because I might say, what's a successful entrepreneur to you? And you might say, oh, well, you have to have a beautiful house and a boat and a nice 2 cars and 4-car garage for expansion and all that sort of stuff. And that's not what I am. Like, I live very basic. Like, you'd be surprised, but to me, it's success in my mind because of where I live, the lifestyle I have. The money is always good, but it's money's just a way for you to live. So it depends on.
You got to feel it.
You got to feel it.
You got to feel it.
Yeah, and that's what I say to most people is I make a choice to live here, and they can't understand, the reasoning behind it, but they've never lived here, so they can't. It's hard for somebody in Halifax to understand what life is like in Yarmouth or in Clare or in Argyll or wherever they choose to live. We have so many awesome parts of our community, whether it's the people or the nature or and we've got a history of resiliency. We don't get paid attention to very much at this end of the province a lot of times. And so I'm hoping that through the stuff that we're doing, that it'll drive more attention to the good things that are happening here. But humans are humans. They're gonna they're gonna say things that they don't understand about our region, and I just shrug it off. I know different.
Now, a lot of this success on your end, and with the entrepreneurs that you're mentoring, if I can use that word, has brought you some accolades.
Yeah, a few. I don't kind of seek them out, but a few things. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about some of those.
There's been a few. So since we started, certainly Ignite and myself have been recognized for different things. So we won the Volta Ecosystem Impact Award the first year they ran the award. So that was a couple years ago, and then we got nominated for a Canny Social Innovation Award, and we won the Atlantic Award for that. And then the next year we won the national award for that. So being recognized
feel good.
nationally was really good for not just me, but my team is the catalyst that makes all this stuff happen. So that recognition was pretty significant because it's entrepreneurs from everywhere in Canada doing amazing things, and sometimes you don't realize the impact you're making, but when somebody hands you an award like that, you got to think, well, are we really, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that happens when those, and I get that all the time. But awards kind of can make me, I enjoy getting the awards. I enjoy the events. Don't get me wrong, but it makes me a little uncomfortable because I still feel that, I'm not that guy that they're talking about. So last year I won the Atlantic Business Magazine's Top 50 CEO Award. So I won that last year. The event was in Halifax, and it was a great event. Again, I was kind of uncomfortable with it, but it was good. I got to hang out with all the CEOs, and then found out this year I won it again. So I was in Newfoundland a couple weeks ago for that award, and those awards are great. The Top 50 CEO kind of recognizes a bunch of things, but it recognizes growth of your business, but it also recognizes your leadership, your impact on communities, your impact on the region, and so in that light, it's kind of recognition for stuff that I've done or I'm doing that I think is making an impact, but this kind of recognizes that. And the other benefit is just being part of this select group of CEOs across Atlantic Canada, and I was sitting in Newfoundland with the CEO of Fortis, and like a $60 billion company, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, that's not me. But I'm sitting with Tariq Haddad from Peace by Chocolate, and I'm sitting with the CEO of Fox Harbor Resort, and listening to them speak, and they all have similar problems that I would face, but also similar opportunities. And what I learned was a lot of these CEOs are so collaborative, and they want to help other people. And so I started to realize this year that I do fit in to that group just in mentality, because there's such a giving group. I would say that about, all of these CEOs. They're trying to do something good in the world besides making money and those sort of things. So, and now it grows my network, so I can pick the brains of, whether it's, I spent some time with Alex from East Coast Lifestyle, a younger entrepreneur, but listening to his stories, and he was telling me, these are some of our growth opportunities, but I'm really struggling here. And listening to other CEOs be a little vulnerable and recognizing that they have a lot of weakness, it hit home for me, because I certainly have a lot of weakness. But I try to fill my weakness with really good people around me that are better at those things than I am, and that's how I try to overcome those things. But yeah, the awards have been quite significant, but it's a good recognition for my team more than anything.
They can be humbling, I'm sure.
Yep.
But I think that at the end of the day, awards for the sake of awards is one thing, but when you get recognized for something that you're doing that you've always done, and this is just the way you are, it's got to feel a whole lot better.
Yeah, because certainly I'm not a big fan of chasing awards and stuff. I think there's lots better people than I am out there to get those awards. But, it's the same as anything. Like growing up and being around sports, it's always nice to get those recognition because it actually builds confidence and it lets you know that you're doing something that's impacting. Um, so yeah, humbling, but it's also a nice pat on the back for sure. I never expect those awards, and the other thing I would say is there was a lot of organizations, their CEOs who were being recognized, like the head of the Heart and Stroke Foundation. Well, I look at that and say, yeah, they're making a huge impact just in people's lives and things like this. The stuff that I do is some of the stuff is bigger, but most of the stuff is more focused on a small group of entrepreneurs. So it's smaller scale, but it's perspective. You're still changing people's lives or their opportunities, and
You're helping them change their own lives.
yeah, and the other, I guess some of these awards have been around some of our youth programs too, because when I started Ignite, back to the same point about, my kids growing up in Yarmouth and seeing where they didn't have exactly the same opportunities as others. So we've built discovery camps and our $100 challenge camps, and most recently we started these Up and Atom camps, which I'm very proud of. They're the first one we ran was centered around the African Nova Scotia community in New Glasgow. And what we did was we brought in different organizations. We brought in St. Yvette's women's basketball to do some basketball camps. The community had told us, well, we really like sports. So we said, okay, well, we'll do a sports camp of types. So we organized the St. Yvette's basketball. We brought in the Halifax Wanderers professional soccer team as well. And what we did was we brought in the Discovery Center and we split the days in half. So they start on the field, like playing soccer for the morning with the Halifax Wanderers, half of the group. And then in the afternoon, they switched over to go indoors with the Discovery Center, where we did the science of the sport and exposed them to different technologies, stuff around health, stuff around robotics, all that sort of stuff. So we kind of tricked them into coming to a sport camp, but really leaving with a little bit more STEM and entrepreneurship aspects of that sport.
Nice.
So we did that. So one day was basketball, one day was soccer. And we've now expanded that. Yarmouth has one of the camps too, and we also have one in East Preston in Halifax. And we've put through, last year we had full camps in all of our camps, but the Science of Sport camp, the Up and Atom camp, was a massive camp for us, and really thankful. We had some great sponsors for all of our camps, including like Michelin, Ernst & Young, RBC. All these groups have been great community sponsors to help us do those things.
A lot of those events don't happen without the sponsors, and they don't happen without volunteers.
No, that's right. So, just the fact that the Halifax Wanderers send their players and coaches and participate, and they're not charging us to do that, is tremendous. It shows their commitment to Nova Scotia. Same with the university basketball programs. Sport Nova Scotia was involved. Chuck Smith, our local legend here, was heavily involved last year. So, those types of people that's what makes these things work, both from just a community building standpoint, but also giving back to youth. And I think unless we build the pipeline of our next innovators and idea makers in our youth, we're gonna be in trouble. We want to have those those kids' ideas. We partnered with Nova Scotia Health and Nova Scotia Health Innovation Hub and the QE2 Foundation and Kids Help Phone to do across the province mental health challenge for kids. And we ran in 6 locations from Sydney all the way to Yarmouth, and we had just tremendous buy-in. But again, we wanted to hear from the kids what their ideas are. I find a lot of times we tend to prescribe what kids need, and this was a really good example of listening and letting these kids talk, and they generated a whole bunch of good ideas around how high school and university and college students can access mental health programs rather than, our prescribed method of this is what you have to do. So it was encouraging to see that, and RBC and the QE2 Foundation and Kids Help Phone really are helping to put these things in motion, and they're able to give grants to all these kids to carry out their ideas, which was amazing. So we pretty proud of that. I'm hoping that we can continue to do those types of initiatives with our partners, and yeah.
What kind of things have you got coming up in the next 6 months or so that you can share?
Nothing. Nothing going on. No. Well, the summer's going to be busy with those camps that I just talked about. So we tend to focus a lot of stuff there, but we're also doing some stuff around marine electrification. That was my morning today, talking to different groups about some stuff around marine electrification. We're doing a grid study with a few partner organizations in Digby and in Sheet Harbor through the summer months. So that's what we're trying to do is establish the need and the infrastructure that needs to be developed in order to support marine electrification. And marine electrification can mean a variety of things. We're talking in terms of fisheries and pleasure craft. But we're exploring different technologies that may be more suited to our environments, because again, with fisheries, there's a lot of issues around marine electrification. So we've done a lot of work in the past around consultation with industry and figuring out where the pain points are, what they're not willing to do, all that sort of stuff. But now we're working with some of the boat builders to try and help them kind of move forward. So that's an interesting one, and we're always really one of my, I guess, pet projects, but not really a pet project because it's a big one. Is working around seafood innovation, and working primarily around some of the waste streams coming out of our seafood sector and how to commercialize those into other higher value products in life science and medical. So we're working with Department of Fisheries, we're working with DFO, ACOA, NRC IRAP, Life Sciences Nova Scotia, and Invest Nova Scotia, and really looking at how we can structure some stuff so that we can actually capitalize on some of that stuff. And I think that's going to turn into a really good initiative for us. We've always done stuff around this, but now it's time to start looking at infrastructure development and stuff. So that's why we built this team with all these organizations. So that's happening, and we're hosting or co-hosting Atlantic Biocon in Halifax next week. And that's all around the bioeconomy. So, the natural world, if you wanted to put it that way. So that's where I'll be talking to a lot of people around the seafood sector, but also agriculture, forestry, those types of things, and all the value added products and stuff we can do. So I get excited about that industry innovation side of things. And then, our focus on the entrepreneur. We're just actively trying to improve our processes. We have this constant, continuous improvement type of model where we try to keep getting better and better as we go, and really talking with our entrepreneurs and finding out like what are the resources that they need today, because the needs change too. So as the companies grow, we need to continue to grow with our services and supports. And I think the sky's the limit there, but it's always going to be continuously changing. But we've got some outstanding entrepreneurs here in Yarmouth, some outstanding entrepreneurs in New Glasgow and throughout the province, and we just want to see them grow. So we've got quite a few entrepreneurs that are coming to Atlantic Venture Forum in a couple of weeks. We've got one of our companies being featured there. We've got other companies that are raising capital, like the ones next door. And I think we're going to start to see some really high growth companies coming out of here. We're now 6 years old almost. So now's the time we start getting those scalable companies really, really growing. And with our current services and supports, we can bring in a lot of new companies at this point.
If anybody wants more information, how do they get a hold of you?
You can come see us, which is always a good thing. It's 208 Main Street in Yarmouth, or you can visit us on the web at igniteatlantic.com.
I'm Gary Nickerson,
And I'm Quinn Taggart.
and this has been Outside My Window.